Okay, I think we're recording now. Gonna have to delete the fourth video. I think this is a replacement for it. Vision 4. Just seen the traffic backed up. I was up in the Spirit over top of you know over top of the Island Highway, and I seen all the traffic northbound and no traffic going southbound, and the traffic was backed up all the way to the south side. Vision 4. In Vision 4, for the fourth time, the Spirit of the Lord came in like a wave and forced my body onto the opposite side. The scene of the vision changed, and I was once again back in my body. This is where I was up over top of the Island Highway, several hundred feet or so looking down. This time I found myself on the top rear deck of a ferry, preparing to leave port. And in 1988, they did not have the Spirit class ferries built. I remember being on the port side, on the outside where the walkway was, and I can still remember looking at the slope of the windows, looking at where people were on the inside of the vessel. And as I stood with many others on the rear of the passenger deck, because we're just coming from the walk deck only, I could see the boarding ramp, the walk ramp, being raised for departure. It was at this very moment that I instinctively turned to the south side of the ferry. This should be the east side of the ferry, because the ferries are berthed north and south, right? So the east side would be toward Vancouver. The water in the harbor began to boil with much activity, and I knew this by the Spirit as a huge 45 to 50-foot dinosaur suddenly stood up out of the water. Depending on the time of day, that the tide can go from 30 feet to 50 feet. There's a pretty good tide here. And I think in the morning the tide goes out and it comes in later during the day. So this would be close to high tide. And I saw this big creature that stood up out of the water, this big T-Rex. I seen him face to face, and this guy was big. He, between his two eyes, must have been at least 5 feet across. He could lay on his tongue, and he would have you for a snack, just swallow you in one swallow, you would be gone. He was like that, and huge creature, but he is much bigger than 45 to 50 feet if this was high tide, because his head stood higher. His head was actually higher than the smokestack of the ferry class here. So you're looking at 80 feet plus, 80 foot high plus, not counting the length. The front claws of this huge prehistoric creature was no more than 10 feet off the deck, and his gigantic head was as big as a medium-sized car, with teeth that looked to be nearly 2 feet in length. It was actually around 3 foot. You could actually take your hands and wrap your fingers around the teeth. They were that big, just long and narrow. I was close enough to where I could feel the heat of its breath as I looked down at the people on the rear of the deck. And people were coming out with these things in their hands. This was 1988, folks, and they were coming out with these cell phones. And people are curious. They're coming out to look at this creature, and many on board the back part of the vessel were killed by massive heart attacks due to the fear of the creature that apparently was pushed up from the quake earlier that day in Victoria. Everyone except for myself was stunned and severely in shock at what was taking place. Walking up to this flesh eater, I began to communicate with it in my mind, right? because I was walking in a spiritual state of knowing and awareness, and almost able to touch his claws. I told him that he had done a good job and to turn around and go back into the water because the powers to be, they were notified and they were coming to kill him. This giant could have easily damaged the ferry. Its great size was almost beyond belief. So the most important thing about this, it does have a spiritual application. So when you hearing this, when you actually hear this on your cell phones, you will hear this on the news. You will hear this event taking place on your cell phones. Maybe even this year. Maybe even I know it's going to be before the Russian-German invasion or Russian-Chinese invasions. When you hear this, this is the time that you have to leave out. You have to leave out. You're going to have to get away from the coastlines. You're going to have to get away from the cities. This fourth vision has to do with the beast rising up out of the sea, or the rising up of the Antichrist. And that's what this sign is about. It's not just about some creature that got loosed from an earthquake. It's a sign of that there's going to be great trouble on the horizon. And yeah, I remember I touched his hands, and we had a fun time, and I wasn't in fear at all. I remember in the spirit, I knew something was happening on the port side or on the starboard side of the vessel, and I began to walk across. There's about a 10-foot walkway on the Spirit class ferries. You could actually walk across, and to the right, you'd actually see where all the cars down below in the lower deck. And this is where this creature stood up, and he had to bend down. This guy was huge, and you probably, if you would have sat on the ferry, you probably would have sunk it. And he was big, the granddaddy of them all. And people were totally fascinated by this creature, but they couldn't handle the fear. So the Lord caught the attention. This went viral very quick. I guess we're going to end here. Come back in the fifth vision. This is Joshua Taylor coming to you from Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada, on the total destruction of the West Coast.